also probably um uh probably use some help with assembly. That's one thing. It's always super busy with the holiday hopes and getting all that ready, and then doing the Christmas bags on top of that. It gets a little hectic, but all right. Anything else
Can
fundraising
we,
wise?
if the clients are doing the assembling, can we come in to volunteer to help to do that? Help them do
Absolutely.
that? Okay. Another question I had, and it's maybe cheesy and overdone, and so I'm kind of coming from my personal viewpoint. Is there a place in downtown, not downtown Elgin, somewhere where you could do like a car wash? I mean, I know that my son would get a big kick out of that. Maybe a couple of times. I don't know. We a long time ago used to attend a church on Larkin Avenue, and I don't know if I'd be able to get an in there, but just wondering. I know all the school groups do it and everything, and I thought, they might get a kick out of doing that with lots of help.
Right.
Something like that. And I was going to ask, I have one of the snowmen. If they're not doing those sock snowmen, I thought those were so darn cute. Um, and I know a while ago they were doing the silk screening, but I imagine the silk might be a little hard to come by. I don't know. I have no idea. But that was also that, and I think scarves. And I thought, oh, I wonder if there was something else that
Hmm.
they could even to benefit at a craft show or something, or maybe not for this year, but maybe just for next year or something like that.
Hmm.
Just a thought.
Right. It was before I started. They made the scarves. The person who left had done that. Um, and it didn't get transferred out, how to do it, or I know that they boiled the scarf or the ties, I think, or I think
It
you
was
had a
before I
silk
got here,
scarf
too.
you had a scarf you wrapped the silk ties you'd pick up at Goodwill or whatever. Um, so part of it is finding the silk ties to use to make it cost effective. Um, and I guess knowing how to do it. And also a lot of it was the clients did help, I believe, with cutting the ties up and pinning them maybe to the scarves. There's some boiling that happens in vinegar and water, I think. um so it's fairly involved, and there hasn't been, I guess, anyone. I think they used to do more crafting. Maybe there was someone who did crafting with the clients, and that was a lot of in Elgin anyway, and that's they sold the items that they made during the day.
Well, and Keeler's always used to hold fair little craft. They had two a year, like spring and fall, where they
Hmm.
sold crafts that they made, and that money went into Keeler stuff, that they did at different classrooms and that. But we hadn't had enough people back to really be able to support that this year, but I'm sure moving forward we will be as well.
Right. Well, we have the walk coming up again in early June. I believe it'd be Sunday, June 11th. We'll do the walk again. I'm not sure who all attended it last year, but it was for the first year. It was a really good event. We had a lot of information about AID. We had tables with the different program uh, managers, directors there to talk about the programs. And we're wanting to build on that this year, but we don't want to have the exact same things. So we'd be looking to maybe have different things highlighted, and maybe we could do something with Keeler, or have a booth with crafts and clients there selling their crafts. We would just have to make sure to get someone to help the clients make the crafts before that happens. um, so Lori, what We can talk about this maybe next week. I'm not sure which programs or program directors I'd need to talk to. about that.
You talked to Courtney Littlejohn, as she's responsible for all CDS, so she could.
Okay. I'll touch base with Courtney on that, but
Yep.
then if you have any ideas of things that you really think should be highlighted for AID at the walk, also let me know that.
Alrighty. Thanks,
Okay.
Angela, for coming today. If nobody has any more questions or discussion, we can let her go to her supper or dessert or something and finish up our planning for next year.
Okay, great. Well,
Thanks,
thank you
Angela.
for having me. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Angela.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right.
All right. Well, I hope you got some good ideas on ways that you can be involved. And at least now you have a face that you can connect with Angela's name, and you can get in touch with her if you've got ideas about ways that you want to be involved or other ideas that you want to share with her. Why don't I begin, Lori, by just really briefly reviewing what we did this year and how we have sort of structured our family council, and then we'll move into some questions about next year. So remember, when we began this 2 years ago, we've had 4 main pillars that we've been building on. One is education about various topics. One is learning about advocacy and becoming involved in that at the state level primarily. One was Lori hosting meetings, seeking advice from us on various topics that are important to the organization. And the fourth was support for us as family members of a person at AID. So those are sort of the 4 main projects that we have worked on over the last 2 years. This year, in terms of education, Lori did some AID updates along with her team right at the beginning of the year. We had a presentation on some advocacy efforts at the state, although this was a fairly trim year in terms of a lot of disability legislation to advocate for. We had an educational piece on future planning, looking at special needs trusts and ABLE bank accounts and things like that. We had a presentation on family-centered agencies and the ways in which agencies and families can work together to promote programming. Lori last time hosted with some of her team a discussion of how agencies like AID are accredited, who keeps us accountable, so that the funds keep coming and we all can be assured that our loved ones are in good hands. And this year we had 2 really good social gatherings. So that's sort of a really brief review of how we have structured the program and what we all did together this year. Anything that I left out of that outline, Lori?
I don't think so. That seemed like everything. We tried to kind of, have them all split up, each pillar, so that it was, education, advocacy, advisory, and support. And it rotated.
So I guess the first question is purely logistical. Are we still good with continuing to meet on Zoom? Because we do cover a fairly broad geographical area. Or next year, should we think about going to in-person meetings? And if we decided to do those, what would those look like? What are your thoughts about that? Do we stay on Zoom or do we try something different?
I personally think Zoom works well. I'm just surprised that more people don't participate because they are informative. And I've found them very useful, and I know my travel schedule's been crazy, so I missed a couple and I hate doing that. But I think that finding a location that everybody can get to would be really difficult, because it's difficult to get to Elgin to participate in helping with a lot of the stuff. It takes me an hour and a half to get up there. So Yeah, I guess from a location standpoint, I'd much rather sit in my kitchen, turn my bird off and, and Zoom.
I
Oh.
agree. Zoom works out really well for us in light of the caregiver shortage. Our daughter lives with us, and it's not very often that we have a caregiver that's available in the evening. So I much prefer Zoom.
Is that the general feeling then that that we stay on Zoom? Yeah, go ahead, Lori.
I was just gonna say yes. I'm just raising my hand to say
Yeah.
yes. It's a general feeling.
So this year, I'm inclined to agree with that as well. So this year we held 2 in-person socials. Do we want to bump that up to 3 next year? Do we want to leave it at 2? Any thoughts about that?
I know I missed one. Were they both in Aurora? And if so, is there a way to do something in Elgin? One of them, 1 out of 3, whatever. That
Yeah.
would be my request.
Yeah, they both were in Aurora, on our campus. Campus is not the right word. Don't use that word. But anyway, it's they were on our property at Aurora, and we had the picnic in the summer, and then we had like a dessert and beverage evening in the spring. We really thought we were going to be able to be outside, but it ended up being really cold, if I remember right, and we were inside.
Yeah,
But
pouring rain all day.
yeah, oh, that's it. It poured
Yeah,
rain.
yeah.
Yeah, it was yucky. But yes, I think that's a fair thing to say, is that if we whatever ones we do, we should do at least 1 in Aurora and 1 in Elgin.
Do we have? Oh,
I missed those. I'm sorry. How well attended were those?
Actually, I thought that I think there was somewhere between 20 and 30 people at both of those. So it was even,
Good.
it was kind of more attended even than like our kind of regular meetings. And I know that people talked about wanting to have more staff people available, right, at least 1, so that you could, I had people tell me, hey, Bob, I had people tell me that, you know, like we would have vice president, executive leadership, right, came to both of those. And people were interested in, you know, directors and or if we start adding in all managers and directors, and VPs, that's like 60 plus people just on our side. So it gets a little unwieldy, but you know, we could at least maybe do directors at one and managers at the other or something. I don't know if people are interested in having, you know, being able to meet more and have a time to talk to more of AID's leadership team.
Do we have the technical, or do you have the technical capacity at a meeting like that? Because I do know I was in one in Aurora, and there was a presentation. And I'm wondering, and this is awkward and I know it, but is there a way to be in person but have some sort of Zoom capability so that someone like Kathy, if we're in Elgin, she can still be in on the presentation part, or she can still, you know, if she wants to talk to someone, someone can check in with her and say, oh, you want to talk to someone? And she'll say, hey, can you send so-and-so over? I don't know. It's just a thought.
Yeah.
It's to kind of expand.
Yeah, we do. I mean, we do have the capability in both Elgin and Aurora. I can tell you that, like, when I have been returning to conferences, just for an example, and this would be smaller than a conference, the hybrid conferences that I have been to have not been good because there's been so much issue with people on screen not being able to hear or feel part of it. They can't get a word in edgewise. you know, and it just ends up not being that great of an experience. So I would, even though I want to be as inclusive as possible, I sometimes think like, okay, if we have it set as an in-person meeting and you can't make it that time, you just can't make it, you know, I mean, in some ways, I mean, because I feel like, you know, and argue with me if you feel differently, but you know, I feel like you don't get much out of it as a person on the screen if most of the people are in the room. But you can tell me if you've had different experiences at some of these hybrid events.
And I think the first meeting, the first social we had in Aurora, you did a short presentation, Lori, but the second one, there was no presentation. It was just milling around and lots of conversations. So it wasn't as if someone not attending was missing some, you know, interesting information.
Yeah, yeah, we did do a short presentation, you know, and we could say that, you know, we're just going to do social, and the presentation is going to be the opportunity to meet and talk to, you know, staff members, you know, and not have any
Yep.
presentation so you wouldn't miss anything.
That's what I'm inclined to think, is that they're purely social, that that there's no sort of other agenda at those meetings.
I
So
kind
why
of,
don't we leave? Go ahead.
I kind of thought that those were intended to be kind of social networking for the parents more than anything else. I mean, that was my take. So yeah, I didn't see a reason for staff to have to take away from their off hours to participate. They're already pulled so thin. So, I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
It's important for me that our executive leadership interacts with families who don't always get to see families, because I have many some that don't, right? You know, so, you know, I will continue to have them attend, you know, and if we don't think, you know, that directors or managers need to come, you know, I think directors might be, it's just, we're really big and we keep growing. And I think it's also a way to, even though it's intended for families to support them, it's also a way to engage and inform our leadership, right? And help remind them about what we're here for. So I think that's kind of useful too. If you all don't, you know, if y'all don't want more people, you know, to be involved, that's fine. But I think it's good. It's only 2 times, and there were plenty of times that, you know, I had an executive leadership staff that was on vacation. I wasn't going to say you can't go on vacation because there's family council social, right? But you know, so we are understanding of life events, right? So I think it's very worthwhile and beneficial, and I have thoroughly enjoyed them in the last year.
So why don't we leave it this way, that as Lori and I put the schedule together over the next month for 2023, we'll keep it at least 2 socials, and one will be in Aurora, one will be in Elgin, and you know, if our schedule turns out, we might have a third one. That seems to me a good way to go. Let's talk about educational topics that you all would want to learn more about in terms of the state, in terms of just general issues related to our thinking about our children or our siblings who are in the program, learning more about AID itself and the services that it offers. What do you want to learn about next year in terms of our educational?
I think it'd be nice to learn more about AID. I had no idea that. I thought it was just the day program that they you know, had, but there's a lot more to AID than just that. And then plus maybe learning what's a typical day at the day program in whatever, Elgin or Aurora. You know, the clients come in and, this is what they do. Step by step, of what they're doing throughout the day, because some of us, we try to ask our sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, whatever. And, sometimes we don't get it's like asking your kid what happened at school today. Nothing.
They're poor
Yeah.
reporters.
Yeah. So, just like what happens, what's a typical day at AID like?
Good. What else?
And what does a typical day look like in one of the group homes?
And I have a couple. I know you guys were talking about able accounts and special needs trusts, but I would like to, if there is such a thing as having even a panel of people who have made plans after they're gone.
Mm.
Like what are different creative ways that they've addressed just who's going to care for their loved one, when they're gone. And just really a brainstorm session just to get some ideas. I know years ago there was a group, I don't know what it was called, but it was to create a corporation where your child was the
Microboards.
microboards.
Yeah.
And I know they lost their funding, but it was, and we were seriously looking into it, and then obviously the funding was cut, but something like that.
So Miriam, are you thinking like a panel of that? This would just be a kind of show and tell among us as parents in the group, or that Lori and I would scout out some parents that we know at AID? Or are you thinking we cast our net broader than that, say, and reach out to the ARC of Illinois?
I'm
And
thinking more broad because,
okay.
there's going to be a variety of resources in terms of humans and money. There's some people that have that financially are in a more stable position for their loved one.
Right.
And for instance, we have 3 other kids. What role they'll play, hopefully, if they mature,
Yeah, I really like your idea of this being a panel of other parents, sort of speaking about, hey, here's what we've done. That's a great idea.
Yeah. And if, even getting a group together and sometimes just even being creative in our own group to think about
Mhm.
something like that, what are some ways? And then the other one is there ever an opportunity for our individual loved ones to create our own business? I know there was a place in West Chicago that had a greenhouse, although there was some controversy about whether the greenhouse was really being staffed by the family members, and I know there's a coffee shop in Ohio, I believe, it's not in Ohio.
Oh,
They're
they're
all-
all around.
Yeah.
There's a
Yeah.
lot. I know there's a place in Naperville that opened up. It's a
Biddy-
poutine.
It's like
Place.
Biddy something.
Yep, Biddy and Bo's.
And I was actually there, and there were and it was really staffed by clients with varying abilities. And just, are there some opportunities besides the workshop where people can become more gainfully employed?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
we
that's a great idea. There's a place again in one of the western suburbs that began a year ago a woodwork shop where they do wood crafts and things like that. I love that. I think that'd be a great presentation, as sort of micro businesses housed within the CDS program at AID.
And
I
not
bet that-
necessarily being resources, utilizing AID resources, because I do think at least the ones that I've, they're self-sustaining and are started with parent volunteers. I don't want to stretch AID even. And then my third one, I actually have 3. My third one is how we can better support house moms, other support, the people that support our kids, to improve retention, and not just with monetary resources, but just brainstorming ways that we can an idea that you have I may not have thought of. I might have an idea, and that could be a parent meeting, or it could be something bigger for other parents, to draw in other parents having presentations that might entice and excite other people. So those are my three.
I
think
had a
great.
question that I wanted to ask anyway, but maybe that could be a suggestion for next year was, in our case, my son gets SSDI. Within a year, he gets SSI. Within a year, he'll get SSDI. From what I understand, SSDI is more, but that the state decreases the increase so that AID gets the same. So is that true? And anything Social Security related really could use a good explanation for families like ours.
Mhm.
And if that's true, that the state decreases what they send because the SSDI goes up, then what do we need to do to get that to change?
Yeah, anything, they always reduce whatever our rate award is based on how
Mhm.
much we keep of your loved one's income.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
You know, maybe jumping off of that, Lori and Kathy, a discussion by Stephanie or someone, Lori, to explain. Like, I have no idea how David's rate sheet works. How is it established?
Exactly.
How is the the lump sum that AID gets every year for David's care? How is that distributed within the agency? I think that would be really interesting, certainly for those of us who have children under that.
I wish anybody could explain it. I always say it's an abacus and a spreadsheet and one staff person at DDD that like does some magic and then tells you, poof, here's what you get. But they actually just did a training from the Division of Developmental Disabilities for providers that I just got the recording today. So I'll take a look at it and see if it might be something that we might be able to show that. And obviously we can tell you some things too, but like, to really know what the reasoning is by the state is a little hard to discern sometimes, but we can certainly talk about all the things that are in the rate sheet and that, have to be covered, because obviously we get, funding for nursing and for dietitian if somebody has a special diet, and for, transportation, and for the upper right hand corner is your living, and it's all your stuff that's supposed to pay for your rent, utilities, cleaning supplies, phone, blah blah, is the upper right hand corner, and it's about maybe $7,000 if you're lucky, so it wouldn't pay for most of the things that it's supposed to pay for, period. But anyway, it is a very interesting document, so we definitely have some ways that we could look at that.
So I think combining the Social Security questions and the rate sheet questions sort of around that whole set of financial questions is might be a good presentation. What other educational ideas, topics do we want to learn about?
I just wanted to, I'm sorry, Kathy, I just wanted to piggyback a little bit on Miriam. A couple of weeks ago, within the last couple of weeks, I went over to Willow Creek Church. Marianne Ellert was doing a presentation for Protected Tomorrows, and it was overwhelming in the sense that, what the kinds of things that you need to do to plan ahead and who you're going to do and putting together your dream team and things like that. And I went to her afterwards. I said, well, could you do something on putting together that dream team? Who's going to be doing what in the future? She also talked about her version of a letter of intent, which is to be able to hand to someone, and so they know your child. They know their likes, their dislikes, their habits, their all of that stuff that when you're gone and you didn't tell, or it didn't come up, or you want to give it to NISRA or something like that. So they have some of that. I don't know if she charges for the workshop, but that's a really good point too. Another thing that I was thinking, and I'm gonna try and concise this. We know that the settings rule is getting closer and closer, and I'd like to know how specifically that affects AID, how it affects the day program, how it affects the SILAs, and a kind of a before and after would be great. Well, this is what it was, and now this is the way it is. We signed we signed off on my son signing a lease for his house, which I know is a different thing, but I feel like we didn't get quite enough information. The question of keys came up, and who's gonna have keys and what are they gonna open, just things like that. And that's in the SCILA setting. And like I say, as well as the day program. I know there was a change in the programming, that sort of thing. And we've talked about what's the community piece gonna look like, and things like that. So that's, whoopsie, a third one. And I think I've raised this before, and I apologize for repeating myself. I know that Aurora had their STARS program. I know at one point it was kind of a let's see how it goes. Is there any possibility of something like that in the Elgin area, or is it on hold? I know COVID put paid to a lot of that. Right. If that's anything that will be revived or repeated in Elgin.
So we have STARS programs, but we had to close 2 of our locations out of, I think we were up to 6 locations before COVID, and we still do have that, but how that kind of really correlates with the HCBS stuff too, right? Ways that we're looking at day, right, and flexibility and a mix of things. So I'll add that to that. I'm sorry,
Lori, that might be a great first meeting right out of the chute in January, as a kind of settings rule update, because we have to be in full compliance by March. So maybe that's our January meeting. Other ideas for educational topics or presentations next year? I spoke to a parent who's often here and can't be here tonight, and she said she'd like to hear more about housing options. Lori, I think you spoke about housing the first year that we were meeting back in 2021, but things move quickly, and things like how the state referral network works, all of that kind of stuff. So I think a housing topic was something that a parent I had talked to was interested in.
I'm always
Any
happy to
other
talk about
educational
housing.
ideas? Yes, exactly. In your sleep.
Right.
Well, Bob came on late because he was watching Mary Ann talk. She had a guest that was speaking about ABLE accounts. And so I think protecting as many funds as we can, anything, the ABLE accounts, and as we get new people on, as the group grows, let's manifest that. I think there are so many people that are ignorant about estate planning and just this past year, I've heard 2 horrendous stories of disabled adult children being left. Their parents never got guardianship for them. There was no plan for if something happened to them. And that young adult who's supposed to be living in Sleepy Hollow is now somewhere down in the southern part of Illinois, because that was the only place they could put them. So I think estate planning is, really a staple, and protecting funds through things like ABLE accounts and I don't know about anybody else. We didn't have our ABLE account set up until the end of 2021. And I am now in a position where I'm having to prepare for a reconsideration, because there was 1 month when we weren't doing anything and there wasn't really anything to spend money on of our daughters. And so between her 2 accounts, it went over, the $2,000 limit, not only by $100 or $200. And now I'm having to try to defend that versus paying her SSI money back. And
That's a good point, Mary. I've heard the estate planning presentations for 15 years, and I probably heard 20 of them, and I need to hear it again, you know. So yeah, that's
You always come
always a
away
good
with-
topic.
Yeah, you always come away with a few nuggets that are new or that you didn't hear before, or look at it differently because all of a sudden you're in a different situation.
Yeah, exactly.
I do want to
Exactly.
piggyback on a potential advocacy discussion too, because there is a bill on the federal level to increase that $2,000. And I think that's something that, you know, we definitely want to advocate in favor of, right? Because, you know, no one can live in their community of choice safely and securely if they're not able to have more than $2,000 in the bank account, right? Because if you have, you know, if you have an emergency, we are supposed to have an emergency fund, right? I mean, that's the responsible thing to do. So anyway, that's a great advocacy issue to.
And let me piggyback on that. A great place to get that kind of information is from the Arc of Illinois. So if you are not a member of the Arc of Illinois, annual dues are only $25, and get on their action alert system. And you know, almost every couple of days, I'm getting action alert messages from them. Call your senator, you know, bug the hell out of them about increasing the asset limit for Social Security. So if you're not a member of the ARC, and if you're not sure how to become a member, send me an email or send Lori an email, and we're happy to get you hooked up with the folks down there. That's really useful.
I'm the chair of the executive forum for the ARC, just as an aside. So, and so I'm on the ARC board because of that.
Any other topics for education? I've got a long laundry list from what you've all said, but anything you want to add? Is there anything more than about advocacy? I mean, Lori, we have usually done, you know, brought Laura Anderson or Kathy Carmody in, you know, sometime in the spring during the legislative session to talk about advocacy. Besides doing that, is there anything that you or anyone in the group can think of in terms of more specifics on, you know, like we've never done a training, for example, on how to fill out a witness slip. And maybe we all know how to fill out a witness slip for a piece of legislation, but those kinds of things I think can be pretty helpful just in terms of basic advocacy training.
You know, another training, I think you're right. And another training along that line is how to tell your story, right? Succinctly, and, you know, making the points that you want to make, right, to a legislator. So talking about how whatever you're advocating for or against affects a constituent in their district and you as a constituent. So there's several good storytelling preparation kind of trainings that might be of interest as well.
We had, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Kathy.
Or you do like I've done, and when I have Matthew in the car, and if we've got a time to kill before doctor appointment or physical therapy appointment, we go barge right into the politician's office. And so they know him very well, and they know his story, and they are, you know, hear about all the things going on that are not helping him. And so they're very well aware of him. Starting after this election, I'm going to have a new senator, so I got to find who that is and find their office and start taking them there, because and so we are always on their mind now. And I met with them the other day with our rep, and he says, we were just talking about you yesterday. And I'm like, good. So I've been doing that, and thankfully Matthew's okay with bopping into those places with me, and it's just short and sweet. Here's what it's like today, and then we're on our way to go to the appointment. So
it's a really interesting idea. The state representative here in the area where Sue and I live, about a year and a half ago, began a disability advisory committee to her
Right.
to her office. And I think they held 3 or 4 meetings. They were well attended. And then she kind of got swept up in the legislative session and the election, obviously. But she might be a person to come and talk to the group about, you know, how to talk to your representative or senator at the state level in terms of disability concerns. So
You're talking about Suzanne Ness, right?
I am talking about Suzanne Ness. I got her sign on my front lawn as we speak.
Yay! Good job.
I've been in contact with her assistant. Well, I ran into her at Heritage Fest with David with me. And I also sent something to her recently, but I did not get any response. I know that she was often saying, what kind of legislation would would be helpful? And that's what I'm thinking, if we can get a panel or get something along those lines, because I can say, I want this or that for my son, but how does that translate to legislation? Because I don't know if that was the best way for her to approach it, but that's how she was approaching it. And if I say, well, I want, I want him to be able to work in the community. So is there legislation that will motivate employers to, employ my son, go about it that way? If they can't coerce them to hire my son, but can there be incentives? I don't know if that's a legislative thing. But yeah, and I don't know if she's the only one. I don't know if there are other people around that would, in different areas that would play that same part.
There are other people. So we are really involved with, we have at least 30 legislative representatives in the House and Senate that we provide services in their area. And we do a lot of connection with them. And one of the pieces of legislation we might want to think about and talk about are things that they can do to enhance workforce for the population. So, paying off people's student loans, offering training at community colleges for credit, changing the Department of Labor's or adding,
DSP code to the Department of Labor job classifications. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things that we could probably, so we could have a whole discussion with some, legislators about that, right? I think we'd have to prepare ahead of time, right? Things that we thought would be good for them, but then we could ask, a group of people, and they're much more likely to show up to a Zoom meeting like this, right? Multiple people, and we often are involved in like legislative breakfasts that are like this. There's one that's in the kind of in the area that we partner with Ray Graham Association and Little City and Easter Seals, and we get probably 30 plus people that are legislators or their office people on that every year. So there's some good potential. That's also something we could think about hosting, right? We could do a legislative breakfast that's put on by the Family Council that would be, part of our advocacy efforts, right? That might focus on what changes or what legislation can you do to support more work, getting more workforce into, social service arena.
All great ideas. Any other ideas around education or advocacy?
I am not ignoring you guys. I'm typing on my phone all my notes from what you're saying. So
how about the format of our meetings? Has the balance been about right? Usually we go between 75 and 90 minutes. We try to keep it right around 75. And, you know, often the presentation is 45, 50, 60 minutes, and then some time for Q&A and discussion. Is that format still, is that about the right format? Should we allow more time for Q&A? What's your thought on that?
I think they've worked really well. The ones I've participated in, I haven't been in the last 2 meetings, I think, but I've been in all the others. And I think that it's been very helpful, and I'm cognizant that other people, you know, that people have lives, and sometimes when your child is at home, it's very difficult to participate. So keeping it to that limit is probably good. You know, my son's not home during the week now, but sometimes he may be. And it really does make a difference, because when he's around, it's very difficult to participate for a long haul.
Yeah. And I realize we're a selective group here, but is this still the most useful time for us to meet? The fourth Thursday of each month at 7 o'clock?
If you remember, we started out at 6 o'clock. The first time, and then we had
That's right.
parents ask us, right? We had family members ask us
Yeah.
to move it later so people could get home from work, you know, could get settled, you know, maybe stuff some food in their face, right? You know, and be able to participate. So, you know, I hesitate to change if we're still trying to get more people, right, to be involved.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, hearing no objection, we'll leave it at the same time then. And this is a discussion that we cycle back to different times, and we had a lengthy discussion about it several months ago. Do any of you have any new ideas about how we can get more family members involved in these meetings?
So let me ask you guys a question. When we're talking about having socials, it made me think about a third date for a social. So we normally don't meet in December. What if we had a holiday open house in like early December? And I don't think I'm necessarily talking about this December, but we could try maybe, but where we would have maybe cookies and punch and like have you know, members of the family council there, and invite other family members to come and like walk through the CDS and meet family council and invite them to participate in family council. Do you think something like that would, you know, like a activity, you know, that happened that invited them in, might get them involved in future stuff?
You know, at one point at Keeler, they did like a Mother's Day luncheon or something like that. And what was interesting about that is a lot of parents came. And it was the option of free food. I don't know what it was, but it had a big draw. And it stopped because of COVID. So they haven't done it in 2 or 3 years, and it became a big process. But if that's something that could be hosted by the family council and provide even box lunches, or, you know, I don't know, something like that, so that we could entice people to come to the facility and then engage them and try to get them to sign up to participate. You know, some of the parents are elderly. And some of the caregivers are very elderly. I'm elderly, okay, but some maybe even older than me. And technology and doing the Zoom call is daunting to them. So if there's another way we could keep them in the loop and do something maybe during the day at a facility, at, you know, at Keeler in the gym or somewhere, and host a family gathering and provide treats, I think you might get a draw. You know, and I'd be happy to host it if that's what was needed, but I don't know.
Then you could do Elgin one time for that facility and
Right.
do the Aurora facility. And it's an expense, but you know, I don't do Facebook much at all. It's only for medical things for my kid. Might have to mail stuff out, either stuff it in their whatever they take to the day programs, but then you got to catch the people who aren't in the day program. So we might have to mail something out to
Yeah,
catch the
we did a
more-
mailing when we did the mailing about the change of pharmacy. We included a flyer about family
Okay.
council, you know, and included it in that. And you know, that's why Jim and I ask all the time, because we just like spin our wheels, because I think that there are a lot. Some of our clients are aged themselves, and so they don't have family members left.
Mhm.
But that is certainly not, you know, certainly not all of our clients. And I just feel like there are more people out there that would benefit from it and would actually
Mhm.
enjoy it, because it's nice to have, you know, a support and a support network, you know, to be able to meet people, you know, in similar situations, because as you said, you know, a minute ago, Kathy, you know, when you've got your loved one at home, you don't always have the ability to connect with people because, you know, you're so busy. But I think that you're right, other Kathy, that, you know, we would do a invitation, you know, to an event and see what that's, you know, see if we can, you know, try something like that and see if we could get people to show up, you know,
Mhm.
and I think if some of us would be there, you know, members of the family council to talk to people, you know, and encourage them, maybe even say you'd help them if they weren't sure, you know, how to access the virtual meeting, you know, that, you know, maybe we could get some
Mhm.
more people involved.
You made me think of a question that's come to mind before when I thought about talking about this with other people is, do you want them to be parents of only clients of AID? Or do we want people that aren't at this stage yet? Do you
Yeah,
want
we have people participate now in family council who are on the waiting list and want to receive services at AID, just haven't got to that point yet. So I think that you know, I think we have been fine with that so far, right?
But we're going someplace even better than Copper Falls. We're going to Great America, or we're going to Hurricane Harbor Rock or Raging Waves. So we're going someplace even that, you know, a certain place you'll enjoy more. Yeah.
or these people know that they're on mic?
I don't think so. I just muted them, so I think that's okay.
Okay, okay. But let's say that we're having a good topic, you know, let's just take estate planning or advocacy. Then it doesn't need to be anybody that's on the waiting list. This would be just, for lack of better words, kind of a public service for parents of special needs children to begin to learn. Maybe they're at the beginning stages. Maybe it's somebody that's going to have a young child that's like, what is my
Yeah.
future going to look like?
We should tap into the special ed directors of all the school districts involved. I'm involved in a special needs PTA for my home district, and my specific reason for joining is to scare the hell out of them on what happens when their kids out of school. And so they've all learned a lot. Some of them, years of telling them to get on the PUNS list, they still don't listen. And one lady called me up, how am I supposed to do that? And you should have done it years ago. Your kid's now going to have to wait a long time. But that would be a good place to try to
Yes.
get the schools to share the information. That's been really hard, although I know now for sure they legally have to give the PUNS information out. I've been beating that into their heads for years, and finally they're handing out that information. So that would be a good way to scare the hell out of them so they can learn what's going on in the adult side.
The very first set of workshops, around estate planning and future planning and what happens when the bus stops coming that I began attending 15 or 20 years ago were hosted by ISCs. So some were by Day One at that time, some were by Options and Advocacy in McHenry County, because I live right on the county line at the north. Lori, do you know, does Service Inc. do any of these kinds, or any of the rest of you, do you know, do they do any of these kinds of general purpose presentations that we could partner with them to host?
So I will say that just this past year, the IDD committee of McHenry County Mental Health Board did a whole week of evening presentations, because I did one on housing, and there were people there talking about ABLE and the educational system and crisis system and all the pieces, right, that they hosted. So that was done by the Mental Health Board's IDD committee put on. And I have been on panels in the past with Service Inc., but it's been a while, and the ARC does the Liggis Family Advocates do, I used to present on those all the time around the community, inviting families to come out. I just think it is like, all of you said about seeing something multiple times, like I used to see when I did my little spiel on housing, the same people over and over, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, you've got to be bored listening to me say the same thing, for 10 times, but they would always come up and say, like you all just said, I heard something different, like at first it was like, oh my gosh, my head's exploding. And then the second time it's like, oh, I honed in on this piece. And then, I honed in on that, so I think that repetition is not a bad thing, right? But, we have to decide, what this family, council wants to do. So do we want to do outreach and engagement with, other families that aren't, a part of AID, or do we just want to encourage, the ARC and Liggis Family Advocates and some of the other, the mental health boards and stuff, and participate in some of that, but not necessarily, drive it all. I think that's kind of a, like, how much bandwidth do we have, and what do we want to use our bandwidth for?
But certainly, I would say wherever we come down on that, Mary, that if you had personal friends, or I had personal friends who aren't connected at all with AID, and we're doing something on estate planning, and I'm like, hey, I think you would benefit from this, send them the Zoom link. I don't have any problem with that. I'm guessing you don't either. Lori.
No, I'm always happy for anybody to hear this stuff, because I just don't feel like families get very much support. So you have to really kind of get out there and try to figure it out yourselves. And so if there's any way we can help with that, we don't have a problem with that at all.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking at the clock, and it's between 20 and 25 after. Anything that we haven't covered? Kathy is screaming at us. Go ahead.
I just have a question, I just wanted to kind of get a sense of what the status update is, the housing that you've been working on. I know we had talked about it a couple times, and I've missed a couple meetings, so I don't know if I missed something. But I was just curious where that stood.
Yeah, so our West Chicago property is someday going to be done. We have a electrical panel that has been on order since November of 2021 that is not here yet. That has to go in before the elevator can be put in. Then we have a HVAC system that goes on top. So we're pegging away at all the other stuff that can be completed. But so I'm hoping, I'm saying tentatively now, move-ins might be January 1st of 2023, even though I don't want, that's the worst date in the world to try to move in, but that's what I'm hoping for. We'll see what happens. In Elgin, on our Elgin property, we are in the midst of doing financial closing for both of those buildings awards. So our 24 unit permanent supportive housing financial closing is slated for the end of November. And we're turning in all kinds of documents and all kinds of agreements and all kinds of things for that. And then the 50 unit low income housing tax credit property closing is slated for March, but we're financial closing. So we're submitting all of those documents as well. I am busily signing my life away on all kinds of documents, promising AID will do stuff for the next 30 and 40 years when I won't be around. But, when I first started developing housing long time ago, my old executive director used to say, what do I care? I'm not going to be here. He'd sign everything. So that's moving forward with the hopes of then breaking ground in the spring on those two properties. At the same time, we are going to be building the community mental health building community center on that property as well. We have lots of different funding in various stages, right? And so I keep saying I am still doing the pole dance fundraising circuit at this moment, and working on getting the rest of our funding for that property. But the board has approved us being able to potentially use some resources, like there's a bonding agency that does bonding, sells bonds, and then you would pay them back like a mortgage, right? That we'll probably look at doing in order to have that money and get some economies of scale in order to put in all the infrastructure, the roads, the sewers, the water, electrical stuff, all that kind of thing. So we're moving forward, and we should be breaking ground in the spring. The newest thing that we're doing is looking at a potential building for purchase in, I don't even know if Jim knows this, but potential building in Aurora for potential place for Keeler, crisis services, training, some administration, HR, some other pieces. So we're in the process of looking at the old pipe fitters building that's on Butterfield Road, and the corner of Butterfield and Church. And we're doing some, we've been through it with the architect. We're doing some due diligence with having a physical needs assessment, and the civil engineer take a look. They've let the outside really grow up and kind of take over. So there's some work that we need done in the parking lot and some of those places. And it's got its original systems because it was just built in the early 2000s. And so we want all those, systems looked at and such. But we are looking at that, and it has some fabulous space for potentially to move Keeler over. So
is that intended to be a temporary space or full-time forever? So have you scrapped the plans to rebuild Keeler where it's at?
No, we just had the opportunity and went by, I happened to go by the location about a month ago and was like, oh, I didn't realize this was for sale, and started looking at it. And it's actually, when we looked at it, and so this is all speculation at this point, right? Because I always dream big, right? But we need more space, and we were looking at building out some space in Thompson Center into the work floor and such. And we could probably do it here, but we had people from all of our programs, including Keeler, go walk through with us, and they were incredibly excited about the potential because there really isn't a lot that would need to be done. You know, there's a built-in medical room with a full shower and bathroom already on the second floor. You know, bathrooms that are accessible. You'd probably have to, we could make one room into, you know, a personal needs room, you know, for folks that need assistance. The classrooms are huge. I mean, it was designed to be, you know, a big teaching facility, right? So there are people that are still interested in leasing the banquet space. We could probably hold our own events there, right? Because it's got a full banquet hall and commercial kitchen. It also has potential places for training for workforce development around the trades, et cetera, that we might be able to partner with, you know, other people in the community that do that kind of work, and might get people that we serve, you know, access to that as well. So it just has a lot of potential. We will see what happens, but you know, yeah, we'll see what happens. But still talking to the city, because of course they want real business to go there. But you know, it's been vacant for it's been vacant since about 2013, 2014. And then people were still leasing the banquet facility and using that up until COVID, right? And then that shut down. So it's been vacant since fully vacant since about 2019. So I'm pretty sure the pipe fitters are really eager to have it off of their hands. They're paying a lot of money per month and taxes and all that kind of stuff to keep it functional so that it doesn't just fall apart, right? So, yeah.
I'm going to show my ignorance here. I don't know what Keeler is.
Keeler is one of our day programs that is in the building that is connected to Hopewell School. So like if you come into our property, it's immediately on the left-hand side, and it is a day program that serves very high support need clients. So people that have physical, behavioral, and medical needs for high support. Many people there have one-on-ones in order to support them. And so they are in a old grade school, which was designed for children. Many of them need changing and other supports, right? That we don't have. I mean, I think everyone does a very good job at Keeler with what we have, but it is not designed to meet the needs of the people that are served there. And so we would like to have some place that is designed for them, that is will be able to treat them with dignity and respect, and that will, you know, work a lot better for what they need. And so once we bought those buildings, you know, our intent was to tear down Keeler and rebuild there, but this particular building that we're looking at, with how much money they're asking for it, which I would not give them, but they would be less than $70 a square foot, and I couldn't build something for $200 a square foot. So, you know, it might be a good thing. So we'll see what happens. So we have not scrapped. We're still like building our, you know, capital plans and that for the next 3 to 10 years. But you know, it might be something where we might still tear down Keeler and try to do some driveway through so that we could go out kind of towards the hospital through the parking lot of Inc., right? So you wouldn't have just one way in, one way out of our Aurora property, because that's horrible. And it's just an accident waiting to happen. Anyway, we have a lot of thoughts, and we're pursuing responsibly, looking at all of them and seeing, you know, how much things would cost to run, and, you know, how much work might need to be done. But we'll see what happens. We're always looking.
That sounds encouraging. What about the old Walmart building on Galena?
Galena, yeah, I just drove by there today because I just live around the corner from there and I wondered the same thing. But every time I call the city and talk to them about any building that has been a commercial big building, they pretty much don't want us to look at it because they have some big plan for, you know. And I told them when I talked to them about Butterfield Road, I said, you never are helping me out here on buildings. You know, I said, we employ 600 people and their payroll goes through your jurisdiction, right? You're benefiting. I think we're like the 3rd largest employer in Aurora, you know, I mean, like, so come on, people, stop acting like, you know, you want to just give us some building downtown that should have been torn down, you know,
Yeah.
100 years ago. But we are looking and we're working and we'll see, you know, we'll see what happens, but we always trying to look at what might work out the best. The great thing about the pipe fitters building is that it really would need, the architects felt it needed very minimal. I mean, like we'd need to change out light fixtures and some of those things that are now old and not the best. I mean, that's one of the things that's not great about Keeler, right? Is that the light fixtures, we have like, you know, 75% of the people there have seizure disorder, you know, and you got fluorescent lights with, you know, coverings and all that kind of stuff. So some of those cosmetic things, you know, would need to happen. But, you know, depending upon if the systems are in good shape, it could potentially be moving ready fairly quickly. So.
Excellent.
Always
Hey,
thinking of
thanks.
something.
Thanks for the update, Lori, and thank you so much to all of you guys. You are so faithful in supporting this group and learning, and you gave Lori and I a million ideas to think about. So we will piece them together and send out the schedule for 2023. And as always, if you have ideas that occur to you after this meeting, then shoot either of us an email and we'll put it into the hopper of our planning. And happy holidays to everybody as we come up on Thanksgiving and Christmas and the New Year. So
Be safe
Very
out there,
thankful for
everyone.
all of you.
Bye,
Yeah.
everyone.
thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you. Bye.
Bye-bye.